Welcome to another short lecture on price indices. Today we're going to discuss a variety of price indices, how they're calculated, and what's their interpretation. So just to review a little bit, in the previous lectures we talked about the notion of gross domestic product or aggregate product, which essentially is a measure that summarizes in one number the total production in an economy. Similarly, we want to have an idea of what's going on with prices in the economy. We saw that nominal GDP encapsulates both what's going on with physical production of goods and services and prices. And we saw that real GDP tries to just look at what's going on with the physical production of goods and services. And so now we want to look at the other component of the value or market value of production, which is prices. And as we will see, this has a lot of important information about the health of an economy. Such a number that summarizes what's going on with prices in an economy in one number is called a price index. And because there are so many prices, think about modern economy literally has millions of goods and services traded. Sometimes we choose a different subset of goods and services that we're going to focus on, whose prices we're going to focus on. And so depending on what goods we're focusing on, price indices have different names. So the first example of a price index is what we call the GDP deflator. And that comes straight out of our discussion of nominal and real GDP. So if you remember a little bit of that discussion, nominal GDP, it can grow as a result of two things. One is because there's more goods and services being produced, and two, because the prices of those goods and services are increasing, and hence increasing the market value of those goods and services. And so we look at real GDP, which essentially picks the base year that we're going to keep prices fixed from that year. And the only reason why real GDP can increase is due to the physical production of goods and services. And so a natural way of looking at what happened with prices is look at the difference between nominal and real GDP. And that difference has to be explained by a growth in prices. And so we can essentially look at the ratio of nominal and real GDP, and that's what defines the GDP deflator. Because GDP is calculated using all goods and services, final goods and services produced in the economy, the GDP deflator is a measure that gives us information about what's going on with all prices in the economy of all goods and services. Now, some of these goods and services may be industrial goods, some of them may be consumer services, finance, all sorts of different things. If we want a general measure, typically what we use is the GDP deflator. It also has the advantage that it's relatively easy to calculate once you have nominal and real GDP measures. Now, the problem with the GDP deflator is that sometimes it incorporates information about a lot of goods. So let's say, the price of plutonium goes up by a lot, and then that may have an impact on the GDP deflator. But it doesn't really affect a lot consumers, which typically on the average day when they're going to the supermarket, they're not buying an ounce of plutonium to take back home. And so for that reason, sometimes we want to concentrate and look only at what's going on with prices that are relevant to consumers. And when we do that, the price index is called the consumer price index. And it just essentially wants to capture what's going on with prices that are relevant to consumers, also known as what's going on with the cost of living for families in an economy. And to do that, essentially the first step is to define a basket of goods and services that the average family or the average household consumer consumes or buys in an average year or an average month or so. So we call this a representative basket, and then we're going to look at how the cost of this basket evolves over time. And so the basket here is going to be fixed, and we just look at how the cost of that basket changes as the prices of the goods in that basket change. Now, there's a bit of a limitation of this approach, which is in reality, consumers respond to prices by adjusting their basket. So if the average representative basket has, 20 tomatoes per month, and now tomatoes go up in price a lot, people are going to respond by buying more lettuce and less tomatoes. And so our approach of keeping the representative basket fixed is not going to allow us to calculate that. So in some sense, it will be an overestimate of the cost of living. As long as the changes in prices in relative prices are not too big, that overestimation is going to be relatively small, and we can confidently use this measure. So let's illustrate this with a simple example. So let's start with our representative basket of goods for the average household, say 60 hamburgers and 4 t-shirts. And let's say the price is $5 per hamburger, $15 per t-shirt in 2010. Then the value of our representative basket here of 60 hamburgers and 4 t-shirts will be $360. And let's look now at what will happen to the value of that basket on a different year. So let's suppose now that for the year 2016, now the price of a hamburger has gone up to $6 and the price of a t-shirt has gone down to $13. Now the same basket of 60 hamburgers and 4 t-shirts has gone up to $412. And so this gives us an idea of how much has the cost of living increased, and it summarizes that some prices has gone up, some prices has gone down. Notice that the influence of a price on the final has to do with, what is the share in the total expenditure. Here, hamburgers have a big share in the final expenditure, where t-shirts are relatively smaller share, and so they have a smaller weight on the final cost of the basket. Now, to define a price index, what does the word index mean? It means that we're going to use that information and change the unit in a way that we can read from the number the percentage change, because what we're ultimately interested is in not how much has the cost of the basket gone up in dollars, but what was the percentage increase. And that's why we're going to use the ratio of the cost of the basket in 2016 to the cost of the basket in 2010 to define the price index, because that's going to give an idea of the percentage increase. Now, that's just a change of unit. It has the same information, but in a way that we can extract percentage increase more easily. We also multiply by 100. That's just a convention. Sometimes you may see some price indices which are not multiplied by 100. The only difference is that if you multiply by 100, then the base year is equal to 100, the price index. The word index simply means we're changing units. And then if you don't multiply by 100, the base year will be equal to 1. And then essentially, in our example, the CPI in 2016 will just be the cost of the basket in 2016, which was $412, divided the cost of the basket in the base year, 360, multiplied by 100. So that gives us a value of 114.4. And the usefulness of using an index is that now out of that number we see, okay, the CPI in 2016 is 114.4. Now that means the percentage increase in the cost of living or the prices in the representative basket of goods was 14.4% over that period. So we just subtract 100 and we get the percentage increase. Okay. Now, there are other indices that you can compute. You could compute the industrial price index, in which you could pick a representative basket of goods. The procedure that we utilize will be similar. Notice the following difference. When we were calculating real GDP, we were keeping the prices from the base year and seeing how different quantities produced, the value of the quantities produced was changing, keeping prices fixed. And now what we're doing is the opposite exercise. We're keeping the goods and services, a representative basket, fixed, and we're seeing how the value of that basket is evolving over time. Okay, so it's essentially the opposite exercise of what we did before. So just to summarize, the consumer price index is a measure of a general price level in the economy that is relevant to consumers. It calculates the cost of a representative basket of goods and how it changes relative to some base years. In practice, it's constructed by the Bureau of Labor Statistics or by Statistics Canada, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US. And it's used to calculate inflation. Inflation is the percentage change in the price index. So from this, we see there are different inflations that we can define. We can define consumer inflation using CPI, industrial inflation using the industrial price index. You could use the deflator, give you a general measure of inflation, and so on. Maybe. Thank you for watching.